Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report from sunny Philadelphia, where we are covering the christening of the USS John P. Murtha. And we have with us the Vice Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Bill Moran. Sir, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Michael. Great to be here in not so sunny Philadelphia on the lead turn of Hurricane Matthew. So if we have to cut this short, it's only because I don't like answering your questions and I want to go back to D.C.
I got it, but I was saying it's always a sunny day when a ship is commissioned into the United States Navy, especially as fine a ship like this under the command of Captain Parker. Obviously, the San Antonio class had some teething problems, but this ship, the 10th in the class, Captain Parker has reported to us that it's zero defect and the ship's running great. But I want to ask you, aside from just the capability it brings as one of the large amphibs in the force, obviously Mesa Verde, one of its earlier sister ships, is responding to Haiti, and I want to ask you about that in a moment also. But what do you see as the growth for these ships over time? You know, there's space forward, for example, for a vertical launch cell. As you look at this class and the amphib force overall, the new technologies that are coming in, how do you envision using these capabilities differently over time?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question to ask right now because we just completed inside the Navy with some think tanks in our own internal review of what we're calling fleet architecture, future fleet design. So the only way you can do that is by look at what you've got and perhaps change the design of how it operates together as a unit. And the fact that the amphibious Navy is very much a team effort is central to having a discussion about the future Navy and what that design might look like. So we're in the middle of doing that, and we owe a report to Congress here very soon that outlines how we view that future vision. And so this capability, the amphibious lift capability, the response capability, and potentially the offensive capability beyond just the Marine Corps side is something we're examining it very closely to see if there's another way to view how to put these pieces together and extend. I would just describe it as extending the reach of the Navy in environments where distance and time and speed are really important, more so than at any other time we can foresee.
Let me ask you about the response to Haiti. Obviously, a tragic situation there, a lot of loss of life. The U.S. Navy and U.S. military is responding. It looks, unfortunately, that the hurricane might make a U-turn and actually, sadly, hit Haiti again. What sort of response are you planning, both in the initial stages, but also follow on in the wake of this disaster?
Yeah, as you know, we respond to what the combatant commander, in this case Admiral Tidd in Southcom, is requesting assistance by virtue of the host nation saying, hey, we need the following help. And so the natural partner in this, as we proved during the earthquake, was to bring the Navy Marine Corps team in there as fast as we can with volume capability. The whole time we're making sure that our own host, our own nation, was adequately supported by our other capabilities, and how deep is the damage to the U.S. coast. So there's that going on. We clearly want to get down and help the Haitians. We clearly want to do what we can in the Bahamas, but we're taking our rudder steers from the host nations, and we're taking that input through on our direction through the Southcom commander. I think what we did really well this time is Admiral Davidson at Fleet Forces sortied ships, seeing this coming, making sure they were out there as far as they could get, a waiting station, if you will, until we had some direction. We kind of saw that this storm was not going to be a small one. Everybody else did. But if we had waited and then tried to sortie, we could have been trapped. So we put ships out. Now they're on their way. They were ready and available to go provide support to the Haitians. And obviously we're looking very closely at what's going on now from Savannah, Charleston, and north. And to your point, if this thing does a hook and comes back around, what can we do to provide other support to the Bahamas and to Haiti?
One of the, in your remarks, you talked about deterrence, and you talked about deterrence no matter where it is, and you also mentioned parts of the Pacific. Obviously, tensions are running high in terms of some of the things the Chinese have been doing out there. Is that part of delivering the deterrent message as well, that, we may be partners on some things, but that also, there is the shield of the United States Navy out there?
Yeah, I mean, for 241 years, that's what we've done, is we've been out forward to protect sea lanes, whether it's trade, commerce, piracy, those sorts of things. And some of those things are still going on 241 years later. So we need to be forward. We need to be present. And what we found over decades, if not centuries, is that presence is a deterrence in its own right. So being there is important. And being there with capability like this in a modern Navy that also has capabilities that we're building into a future design to extend the reach of that Navy, I think is something we're pretty proud of. And we want to keep letting our allies and our partners in the region know that we're not going anywhere. We're there to support them, and we're there to protect our own national interests.
And then was that message intended in any particular nation?
Not at all.
Let me take you to the next question about A2AD. Obviously, the Chief of Naval Operations did make some headlines. He wrote an article about anti-access area denial, and it's gotten mixed reviews. There are some who say, you know, it's good the CNO is right, the term is being used imprecisely, but then also some have taken the CNO to task and saying, you know, it's almost like, well, we have to focus on other problems. He didn't mention what the other problems were. And some people are, you know, one friend of mine told me it's like putting a bushel over a very complicated problem. This is the big problem that we need to be focused and worry about and not move on. You obviously knows what he's thinking probably better than anybody else does. You know, was that part of the intent of what he was doing? I mean, you know, what's your readout of why he's making this case and making it now?
Well, first of all, I think it's pretty apparent that Admiral Richardson's a pretty thoughtful guy. And he looks at how people describe things, how people talk about things, including internally, and examines them for precision and for accuracy, and what do they do to influence how we make investments in the future, how we design the fleet for the future. But it also is a message to ourselves about just because somebody describes an arc of impenetration called A2AD for the last decade or so, does not mean we can't operate in that area. It does not mean we can't be effective in that area in combat or influence. And all we're saying is that we understand that there's physics and there's science and there's engineering that we have to deal with inside of that technology, that countries like China, but they're not the only ones who have a defensive posture. But it isn't necessarily all it's cracked up to be. And we believe we can operate in there, and we're going after it very, very quickly and as strongly as we can, so that we tell ourselves and our sailors that, hey, if we are asked to go to fight in any environment, in any part of the globe where there's this aura of an A2AD environment, it's something we can still go operate in. And you know, obviously, some of that is stuff we're not going to talk about how. We just want to let people know that it is not invincible. And the Navy and Marine Corps team and others, including the Air Force, we've got some pretty good capability.
But what are the other challenges that he wants people focused on as well? You know, in the paper, he made it clear that, you know, I don't want everybody to become so focused on A2AD at the expense of other things. What are some of the other things he wants to free up some mental horsepower for?
Well, you know, when I said earlier that this fleet design, he's really saying, and we are looking very closely how we pull the capabilities that we have in the Navy together in a more netted, more comprehensive way, because we're eventually going to get to a point where weapons and capability by our adversaries and by ourselves have a pretty long reach, and that reach and that distance creates inaccuracies and challenges for us from an engineering aspect. So we're really taking those things apart and putting them back together and figuring out what really keeps them whole, accurate, and very capable. So there's lots of pieces to this. It's not just a statement about political military affairs. It's a statement about how we engineer things, how we bring programs together inside the POM, and what smart investments can we make by taking things we already have and making them better through engineering, science, and physics.
You were a Chief of Naval Personnel. One of the other big things is the elimination of all 71 ratings. You know, some of them foundational rates, bosun's mate, gunner's mate. that have existed since the dawn of the Republic are things that will go away, be replaced by, the Naval Enlisted classification system goes away, and there's going to be now Navy occupational specialization, which is going to make you very similar to the other services in terms of sort of the task-specific coding as opposed to the career fields that have existed historically. But there's been a little bit of a backlash. Some people are very, very proud, for example, they struck for that rate. Several have struck for several rates, and that's the reason why some people say, look, is this, it was driven partly by the Secretary saying that, get man out of a lot of these titles. But why and what does this do that the old system did not do, for example? What flexibility will you have now that you didn't have, for example, before?
Yeah, what I'll focus on, Vago, is that first of all, we've got a lot of work to do to demonstrate the vision of what was laid out there by the Secretary of the CNO, Mick Bond, CNP. And my view is that rating names by themselves don't necessarily connect to industry. They don't connect to opportunities outside the Navy. They're wonderful inside the Navy and how we've talked for decades, if not centuries. Although we have changed rating names 700 plus times over the course of our history, so it's not exactly new. That said, what we're really aiming to do is to be able to better communicate in this world of a next generation that likes to go in and out of opportunities, expand and look for new opportunities, whether in or out of the service, and make it easier for them to make that connection with corporate America, with businesses, with the American public, who don't know what a bosun's mate is, who don't know what a corpsman is necessarily. It's well understood within the veteran community, and that's okay, but we're trying to reach a larger audience. The other thing is when you're trying to make connections with the school systems, the public school systems, the college school systems in the state of you name it, we have to be using common vernacular, common language, because there's some certification requirements that go on with that, and all we're trying to do is make it easier to connect those things together so that our sailors get credit for the training and skills that they learn when they're on active duty. And it makes it easier, frankly, for us to place people who have an interest in joining the Navy if they have those same kind of certifications and requirements. So it's a combination of those things, but none of us are. We all recognize how much work has to go into making this transition real for sailors. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a while to put it into advancement exams and ratings, rating opportunities. But I think over time, we'll start to demonstrate how these things will affect young sailors who come into the Navy to learn a skill and be able to translate that skill more easily on the outside. Keep in mind that 40 to 45% of every young man and woman who joins the Navy, and this is historical, and it's necessary, but 40 to 45% leave after their first tour. They're looking for how does that training and opportunity experience translate on the outside. Those who make it a career will eventually want to have that same opportunity when they leave the service. So it's a significant shift in how we view it, but I think it's an important one. Down the road, I think sailors will start to see the value in this.
And so you're saying that it'll make it easier from a long-range talent management perspective, both for attraction but retention of talent.
It'll make it easier for us to put them together, both inside the Navy and as sailors transition out of the Navy, yes.
Let me ask you one last question. There was a little bit of back and forth with you and Undersecretary of the Army Patrick Murphy, who is a proud Army veteran, and you said that it's great to be in Philadelphia, the city where there have been so many glorious Navy victories. Obviously, the Naval Academy has done pretty well, I think, in the contest over the past 14 years. It's the 15th. Navy wants to go for 15 this year. Slapshot Carter, superintendent of the Naval Academy, is pretty confident they're going to do it again, but there are others, including Navy fans, who have some questions about whether or not they'll be victorious. What's your call right now, Admiral, about how you think the most important game of the year, at least from an Army-Navy perspective, is going to go?
I'm very confident in our team, but I would also tell you that every year for 15 years, it was too hard to tell because these guys go at it hard, they fight hard, and the outcome is often you know, some good fortune and obviously great skill on whatever side. But take nothing away from either side on this one. But I feel pretty good about our chances.
Sir, thanks very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.